Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be doing some more wiring on the Nova. We're putting in an aftermarket wiring harness. In my previous video, which I'll link to in the corner, I kind of went over the wiring harness, and I'll go over it a little bit more in this video, and especially more in depth because we obviously have to get this thing installed. So you're going to find out a lot more about the wiring harness in this video. As you can see though, by the colorful pasta that we have running over here, I have got a little bit of a head start, and I have gotten the fuse panel mounted inside the car. And I'll go ahead and show you kind of what I did to get it mounted in there, and then I'll give you a closer view of all this stuff. All right, so obviously I have the wires running through the firewall up here, and for this little box where the old fuse panel was mounted at, I just made this little block off plate, and we're gonna go through and get all this stuff cleaned up later as well, but we're gonna get everything kind of run through here. But it's super important though to use those rubber grommets when you run through the firewall. So as you can see here, I have some by Install Gear. I got these off of Amazon, and there's just a variety of sizes that you can use, and it tells you what size hole you need to drill. And then as you can see, you just kind of press it into the sheet metal, and then it'll protect the wires when they run through the firewall. The kit was super cheap, and there's several different sizes in there. So if you're interested in that, I will leave a link down in the description, but those are definitely a necessity. So as you can see, this harness is pre-sectioned off with the little tape right here, and these will go to different sections of the car. So everything that I have pulled through the firewall right now is obviously for the front of the car, or I wouldn't have pulled it through. We're going to get all this stuff kind of separated and organized here in a second, but first I'm going to show you where I put the fuse panel inside the car. And as you can see, the fuse panel is mounted up there, and it's actually just replacing the factory place for the fuse panel. So everything is just kind of loosely mounted in there because obviously a bunch of moving parts are going to be happening, and I didn't want to break any connections or anything like that. So it's just kind of loosely in there. That way it has a little bit of play, and it's less likely to break on us. So kind of while we're getting everything routed through here, we don't have to worry about this possibly breaking and then having to take it all out and do all that crazy stuff. All right, so a reminder, this setup will be a little different than probably what you guys are going to run. Most of it will be the same. The only difference is I have a carbureted setup right now, which will eventually be EFI. I kind of want to show you guys again that each of these wires are pre-labeled. My camera's kind of freaking out right now. There we go. So each of these wires are pre-labeled every few inches or so. So that's going to make it a lot easier for us to know where these things are going and not get as confused. Really makes installation a breeze. So you need to make sure that whichever way you're going to route this, there's going to be plenty of extra wire. That way, if you have to take the fuse panel out, you can actually still pull it back and it's not stuck where it's currently at. So if I have a little extra room in here, I could easily shove the wires back in there and then have a little bit of room to where I can access the back of the fuse panel in case of a failure on the back end. All right, so I've got all the power for like the alternator, the starter, the horn, all that kind of stuff. The horn's actually on the other side, factory, I believe, for these cars, but we are going to put a new horn over here on this side, just so I don't have to relocate all this stuff. Okay, so in the kit is this little pigtail deal for the alternator. The kit also provides like for the early, the late model, and then the generator setups for the GM applications. So we have an HEI distributor, so this is the one that we're going to be going off of. This is a points style. So as the diagram shows here, the right side gets a ring terminal put on this little post right here, which is already pre-installed on here. So that's pretty nice. And then you will just run the wire from this strand that says alternator power to this post, and then that post will be connected to this post, and then this wire that is not terminated is for the alternator exciter wire, which I doubt you'll be able to see, but it is the white wire that runs up through here. So we'll go ahead and make those connections, and then we'll start with the next step. All right, so we've got that set up, and now we're ready for the starter connections. And in the kit comes this fusible link. This is super important to put in there for safety reasons, and if you don't use it, it voids the warranty on this wiring harness. So, all right, so how this wiring harness gets power is through being connected to the large terminal on the starter, which is going to be then connected to the battery. So this wire is marked solenoid power, and in the kit is a fusible link that you have to put on the end of this. So this is just a 3-inch shorter piece of wire that has a large ring terminal on the end. I swapped it out for a connector that actually has heat shrink tubing. And just like that, now we have a nicely insulated end. So we're going to connect this to the large terminal on the starter. We're gonna leave this one extremely long. We have to worry about getting around the headers so that we don't burn a hole in this wire. All right guys, we're starting to make some progress. And as you can see, I'm kind of running all these wires together here. That way we can put a nice little wrap around them and then it'll look really clean. There's not gonna be wires all over everything. I've also made these little hangers here. We will paint those black just to match all this once we clean this whole thing up. But we're gonna keep on going forward. So if you were gonna use these, choke power will go to the terminal on your choke mechanism right here. This was actually a conversion that I did, but the positive right here, that's where you'll hook that up. All right guys, so the other starter wire is this one right here. It says switch start, or ignition switch start. That means that would be down here on the starter, obviously, to the terminal on the right side, closest to the block. On HEI setups, the post on the left side of the starter solenoid, if you're looking at it from my angle right here, is not going to be used because we are on a HEI system. So typically we don't have to worry about hooking up the left terminal. So I think that is going to complete at least the starter and the alternator, and now we can move forward and keep doing some other stuff up here. All right, so the rest of the wires here we have cut apart, and we are going to try to figure out which ones are for the lights, because obviously those will be routed kind of up through here, and then you'll have your pigtails that actually come in the kit. So these are your super common GM headlight pigtails, and these fit perfectly on the back of the headlights that I have here. The instructions also show you which of these is for the high beam, the low beam, and the ground. So that's super useful. So we're just gonna kind of figure out which one is for the lighting, and also we'll have to find one for the fan. We're not gonna hook the fan up though, because when I convert to EFI, that has a fan controller on it. So I'm sure that for my application, I'm not going to need the fan power, but I'm going to run it through just in case, and if we need it, we can get it later. All right, so in this group of wires, we have left front park, and that's going to run up to our left, our driver's side parking light, and then run across from the left side to the right side, because obviously you can have both parking lights on at one time. Then you have left front signal. So that obviously will just go to your left front signal, because you don't want to tie that into the right one, or you'll have hazard lights instead of a turn signal. You've got a left high beam. That'll also go across and wire into the other headlight. You've got a left low beam, which will again go over here, and then you'll jump it over to the other headlight. And then you got all your sensor stuff. So temp sender, oil sending unit, the antenna, and the last one is a tack signal. All right, I did want to show you the headlight schematic here. So you have the little pigtail, that's what that little symbol is supposed to be right there. And it shows you that this terminal right here, the one that's kind of sitting horizontally, that one is your low beam. So you're going to follow that all the way over there. So then it says low beam will be tan. But as you can see, it goes up and then over to your other. So it's supplying both of the headlights off of the one wire. So you just have to split it up here and then continue the power over to there. And then you can obviously see which one's ground and all that, but pretty detailed instructions. So, and it even shows what color they are and all that stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and get all this stuff installed, and we'll go from there. All right guys, so as you can see, I got the wire kind of all wrapped up there, and the wire I'm unsure about, I just left it out for right now. We can always go back and wrap it up in there as well. And then we have it running through the core support, kind of just in the general area of where we need it. All right guys, so I wanted to kind of show you that these little headlight pigtails fit on there perfectly. So we'll get those wired in, and from there we'll get the parking lights. The parking lights we do not have pigtails for, but we can go use our old wiring harness and get something set up there. So as you can see, we're starting to get pretty close now. And now what seemed like a huge job is no longer that intimidating, because we're just kind of doing everything one by one. And trust me, this is a very doable job. A lot of people can get intimidated whenever they see all this colorful pasta that's laying on the ground, but really it's not that big of a deal because the wires are just extremely long. So I promise you it's not that difficult. It just takes some time, and just do everything one by one, and everything will work out smoothly. Especially when you have instructions like this, it makes things fairly simple. So All right guys, so you can probably tell we're no longer at the Nova. We're at my F100, just kind of using it for the battery. So we've got our turn signals right here. These are obviously parking lights, turn signals, and we need to figure out which one of these signals is for the turn signal and which one of them is for the running lights. I can tell just by the way that this wire is running up through here, this is going to be the ground, and we just need to figure out which one is turn signal. So the parking light will be dimmer, so we'll hook this up right here. We're going to ground this on the negative terminal and then hit the positive wire over here on the positive side. That one appears like it's going to be the dim one. And yes, that one's much brighter, so that's going to be your turn signal right there. It won't flash, obviously, because there's no flasher on it, but so we know now that this wire is going to be our turn signal. So that one will go to the turn signal power from the fuse panel, and then the other one will be our running light. So from the factory harness, I went ahead and just snipped these things off because these are definitely reusable. And that way we can just go ahead and wire into the existing wiring and it'll be no problem at all. So the only thing we have to remember is to find good bare metal to ground that to. And I'll go ahead and show you while we're talking about what I did on the headlights. Both the low beam and the high beam wired up here on both sides. And then this right side here is the ground. So I just made bare metal with a wire brush and then used a self tapper just to get some bare metal. So that's a nice solid connection, should stay there a while. We're gonna go ahead and get 2 turn signals wired in there. And then after that, I don't think that we're gonna need to hook these up for right now because we're converting again to EFI. So we're not gonna need those just yet because it depends on what kind of signals we need for the EFI. So obviously my application is gonna be different from yours, but same thing. You just follow exactly where these say that they go. So one will be the oil pressure sensor. You'll just take it over to the oil pressure sensor. One's for the temp sensor, take it over to the temp sensor. Super easy. The only thing you have to do is figure out where you're gonna route it, keep it from heat, and you wanna make sure you have the right terminal on the end of the wire. Another thing I wanted to point out is these aren't your typical butt connectors. They actually have solder in the middle of them. So that way, whenever you connect both ends, you heat it, that solder will melt all over the wires. And then again, when it cools, then you have a nice tight connection. So if you're interested in these, also, I will leave them down in the description because they are so much better than regular butt connect. All right, so there's an example of how it looks once you heat it up. Nice, really tight connection. It's not coming apart. Another thing I like to use instead of the traditional electric tape is this kind of fabric tape right here. This stuff is really good, very flexible, protects the wires, but it's not all messy and stuff. So if you need to take the fabric tape off, it literally just comes right off and you don't have all this black gunk all over everything and everything's sticky and all that crap. So I will also put this in the description below as well because that is far superior to your normal electric tape. All right guys, so a couple things. First of all, we have our coil positive hooked up. That's just going to go over here to our HEI distributor. As you can see on top there it says battery and the other one's a tax signal. So we've got that figured out. Now we are inside the car. Everything's going pretty easy so far. So, all right, so hopefully I can show you guys kind of what we're dealing with. I've got limited light here, so I'm trying to make it as good as possible. But we have all these wires. They're all sorted out by what section. So this is all like the dash section. And the really long wires, we just kind of have them going out the door. That way we know that all those are for the back of the car. So all the stuff up here is what we're gonna have to deal with for our dash components and the ignition and stuff like that. On most GM cars, you'll have a steering column plug like this. I forget how many wires run to it exactly, but it varies depending on each car. So the kit actually comes with the other side of this plug. We'll worry about that here in a minute because this is going to be for all the turn signals, that kind of thing. So the other thing is up here on top of the steering column, and you already have pre-terminated plugs. It's just literally a plug and play. You just plug them right in. The kit fit perfectly. And those are for pretty much every GM car with a steering mounted ignition switch. So that's what all those wires right there are for, is for the ignition switch. So then you have another plug down here. This is just for your dimmer, and all the stuff is labeled for your dimmer, and it plugs right into most GM dimmers. And then you've got this group of wires right here, which I'm pretty sure are all for our turn signal setup right here. So we'll get all that wired in, and we have pre-terminated ends here. So they literally just go right into the plug. So I'm not sure if this kit is directly color coded with the GM color coding of the wires up here, but we'll go through the kit, make sure that we have the correct terminals for all these, get them all lined up, plug them into the harness that they provide in the kit, and then everything should work perfectly. This one's super easy. You just plug it into your dimmer switch, and then you've got all this stuff that we'll worry about here in a second, but this is all for dash components, as well as your headlight switch and that kind of thing. So we're going to, for right now, just put those outside of the car as well. Again, this part of the kit is more of a like text section. So you can go through here and just read and figure out where all these wires are supposed to go. But still, really good instructions. Probably a better, more in-depth set of instructions that I've seen as far as the kits that you can get on Amazon. So we'll read through here, make sure everything is correct, get it all hooked up, and we'll put that on a time lapse, and then we'll check back again. All right guys, so we're moving right along here. We've got the carpet peeled back. We've got the little door sill trim plate thing taken off of here, and we've pulled the carpet back. And underneath that little sill plate, there's this big bundle of wires that runs to the back and feeds like your turn signals, your tail lights, everything like that. So all we're gonna do is just snip this and then pull it out that way, out the trunk. And then that way we'll be able to get all these wires out of there and put in some nice new wires. You could save this harness because somebody will probably want it, but this one's already chewed up, so I'm just gonna snip it and pull it out that way. Now, if we go back around to the trunk, we should be able to just easily pull this stuff out, and then all of our wires in the trunk will be loose and free and ready for some new wires. All right, so now that we got all that out of there, all we're gonna do now is just route the new wires down the same way that we just pulled the old wire out of. And then the remaining wire that runs from the cut part forward, we're just gonna have to probably cut it a couple more places. And we may even have to pop off that little trim piece right there. So we'll figure that out, get all that stuff removed, route the new wires, and all that will be on a time lapse. All right, so I've got everything routed where the old wiring was going. So as you can see, it's tucked up underneath there. That tape's doing an awesome job too of protecting the wires, and it's still pretty flexible where you can work it in, and it's not as stiff as like when you start putting a bunch of electric tape on there. So I've got the wiring running down through here, and then behind the seat belt here, you can see where it goes up behind the seat. So it's gonna be out of the way of all of the traction and stuff that'll be going across here. So, all right, so I just have it running up through here. We'll kind of redirect it in the factory way where it's supposed to go over here. And then we'll kind of go to like tail lights and trunk light and all that stuff. Some of these aren't going to be required on every application. Like for my EFI setup, I have a fuel pump wire that'll be running back here. You won't need that on every setup, but since I'm going to be running an electric fuel pump now instead of the factory mechanical, then I will need that wire back here. So a couple of the wires that I feel like I won't need for right now, they're just kind of dangling right there. One of them is power windows, which I don't know if this car will ever see power windows. Power locks. I do plan to put power locks on this car, and of course that'll be a whole separate video. All right, so as far as the rear wiring goes, I'm just gonna pretty much leave it like that for right now because everything that I'm gonna be throwing in here will all be updated. So like I have to make new custom lights because mine are just leaking horribly, and I just want to stop all that. And I don't really want to spend the money to put the factory lights back in there. So I'm just going to make my own little lights to go in there. Then we've got these little side markers, pretty much until we get more stuff going back here, there's just nothing to put wires to right now. So everything's there when I need it, and we will move forward with that in another video. So this rear part is gonna be done for me, but if you're still working on your car, then you'll literally just do the same thing you did on the front side. They're all fairly straightforward, like rear turn on each side. You've got your fuel gauge, fuel pump, so it's pretty straightforward. I wish I could do a more detailed video on the backside, but I'm gonna have to wait until another video where we make the lighting and the fuel pump and all that stuff. So if you're interested in seeing this wiring back here complete, those videos are definitely to come. Also, I think these are an absolute necessity when you're wiring things. That way you just don't have to climb up in the trunk every time. So pretty much this is just a little long metal strap, and it'll come all the way out. It's like 20 feet long, I think. And then you can kind of run it through where you want your wire to go, and then you just reel it. It's got a little handle here. So you reel it like a fishing pole, and it will bring the wire all the way through, because it's got that little hole that you put the wire through. But that's super easy way. You don't have to climb in the trunk and then worry about feeling around for the wires and pulling them through. You just get this little cable snake set up and then pull them through. So with the rear wiring being done, the front wire is done, and then now we have to move on to this section. So all these wires will go up here on your instrument cluster and that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of get these separated, figure out where every single one of them needs to go, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I'm gonna try my best to give you guys a close up. So basically, this wire here is the headlight power. That's how it's marked on this kit. And that just goes to the corner terminal over here on this headlight switch. And then you have your dimmer power, which comes over here, and it goes to this post right here. Again, I don't know if you can see this, but then we have our parking lights, or our running lights, which that is just below the dimmer power right there. And then you've got this other terminal here, and that's just kind of a loose wire for right now, but that will go up and eventually feed power to our gauges. So since I'm converting everything over to EFI, I have a little display that's going to go in the car, and it's going to give me the readouts for most of those gauges. So I don't want to complete the wiring for the normal gauge cluster, because most of the readouts are actually going to be displayed on the screen for the EFI system. I'll have to find out if I can like split those wires and feed power to both, where I can get accurate readouts on both, or if I can only pick one. So I'll have to read a little bit about that and then figure out what we're gonna do. That'll be a video that'll be coming out very soon, with just finishing up all the wiring, testing everything, and then of course we have to do the battery relocation. So, but for now though, I really feel like we have a really good start on the wiring, and I'm happy with how far we've come. I'd say we probably have like 75% of the wiring done. So the rest of it is just figuring out what I can and can't use, and like fan controls and everything, because the EFI system will also automatically kick in the fan, and then I can obviously put in an override like I did on the truck back here. Then again, I also need to make some new taillights for the back, so that's going to be in another video. I've got the instrument panel back there, just waiting to get everything hooked up to it. We'll definitely keep the radio. I gotta have my music. But I hope that this video kind of gives you an idea of how easy it is to actually wire your car up, because I could go through and complete this within like maybe an hour or two. There's also just a bunch of stuff I don't have, like all of my bulbs are busted because the car's just been sitting forever. Honestly, I probably could have planned a little bit better and timed it a little better where I had everything in, but this is going to be part 2 of the wiring video. So the finishing parts and testing everything to make sure everything works. The video will definitely be coming, so stay tuned for that. If you guys have any questions, just leave them below. I'd be happy to answer and help any way I can. If this video made you feel a little bit more comfortable about approaching wiring your own cars by yourself, let me know in the description. I hope that it gave somebody some type of value. So other than that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. There'll be plenty of videos coming on all the projects. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and I will catch you guys in the next video.